I was not born in Jerusalem, but I was born again in Jerusalem. My second birthday is the 6th of August 1972, 13 days after my arrival to Israel, having run away from the communist hell of Romania. I was almost 26 years old, and I had all my life in front of me. A few days after my arrival, I saw in an Ashkelon movie theater some images from Jerusalem, and I was stupefied. Jerusalem was just a few miles away. I couldn't wait. On the 6th of August, I arrived in Jerusalem. I decided on the spot that this is a place where I will be from now on. It was more than choosing a place to live in Israel. It was a decision to live in Israel. I have to tell you that Israel represented for me just a gate to freedom and nothing more. My father and his father and his father's father were a long row of so-called secular Jews, integrated Jews in Europe. Their origin is somewhere in Bohemia, and they belong to the Czech tradition of Jews, secular Jews, back to the 18th century. My family bred me for France, where most of my family lives. Or if worth come to worth, for the United States, go west, young man. And here I was in Jerusalem, taking with an incredible lightness the most fateful decision. This lightness is rooted, probably, in my inbuilt belief that the center of the world for me is exactly the spot where I find myself, then and now. I'll never forget the 6th of August 1972. The camera is following those images I got from my first day in Jerusalem. Those images were carved in my memory, and what's funny that even today when I take a visitor on a quick tour of Jerusalem, I find myself unconsciously following those first images, those views, the colors, the smells, the sounds. In fact, the first meeting of an European with Asia and with the Middle East, and the first meeting of a Jew with his roots, the first meeting with Jerusalem, the mother of all cities, the dream city. When I arrived in the town, I had been an architect for 2 years. After finishing my studies, I joined the National Theatre in Bucharest as a scene designer. In Romania of the early 70s, there was not much building going on. And in Israel of the early 70s, there was not much theatre, but a lot of design and building. And then I worked at the higher hand for a few architectural firms. In 1978, 6 years after my arrival, I had the guts to start a business of my own. And then I had the luck to get important commissions from the very beginning. So now, 20 years later, I can walk in neighborhoods I designed many years ago and where the trees are grown. In the beginning, I got commissions for housing developments, and I felt the need to do it differently. Here is the GAD project in Ramon. Social housing, a neighborhood for young couples. The program received from the Ministry of Housing small units of 750 square feet. I made a proposal of units designed around an inner court with the possibility of increasing their size in time, but without affecting the architecture. I had in my mind the retaining walls of the Jerusalem hills and the charm of the inner court, the private piece of sky. Here was the project, and then I had the honor to meet for the first time the steering committee of the ministry. Ram Karmi, Ada's brother, was then the chief architect of the ministry. That was my chance. Strong, opinioned, unconventional, He was not put off either by my age or by my strong Romanian accent. He backed me against some old guard design bureaucrats, and here I got the approval for the most unconventional public social building project for young couples. Next door to the GATT project, another one, also public building project for the Ministry of Housing, stepped units with terraces facing the view and open air staircases. And then here is Neve Orot neighborhood, a development for observant Jews, including a center with 2 synagogues, shops, and ritual bath. I followed the shape of the hill. I tried to create a rich and surprising inner space, totally pedestrian. Green path leads to public courts, no staircases. Every unit has its own separate entrance and unobstructed view. The development is self-contained. In spite of the steep slope, everyone gets a direct access from the parking area. No cars around, the kids are safe, and the parents happy. All the path leads to the synagogues and to the shop center. So now, some 17 years later, all the trees are there, and walking incognito through the neighborhood gives me a very special feeling. The Neve Shmuel development. Here I had to comply with the tiled roof demands of the urban plan, but still got the possibility to create not just housing units, but the character of a street. The elements of the inner courts are again to be found in the units, in between the units, and between the houses and the retaining walls. And now Shmuel Hanavi neighborhood, an interesting place. 1,600 units of 500 square feet, built in the early 60s, exactly on the border dividing Jerusalem. Modern architecture, small units with machine gun positions on the roof. Immigrants from Africa, Asia, East Europe. Poverty, permanent danger. In fact, those immigrants, I think they were used as a second human wall. It became right away a slum. 20 years later, Project Renewal, 1980, started all over Israel. In 1984, we got the commission from the Ministry of Housing and the Project Renewal. We increased by 35% the size of the units, a completely new front, something unexpected for Jerusalem. I think that the citizens became, for the first time, aware and proud of their new environment. From the very beginning, a big question always haunted me about architecture as means of expression of my culture. I had to look around to find an answer to this question. Is my architecture appropriate for the people who will use it? Does an international architecture represent the solution for my people in our all-new country? What is Israel? Does it produce the culture of a center, or it is just a center of culture? If there is such a thing as national character in architecture, how can it be defined, this land, for those Jews coming back from so many cultures? Is the architectural Muslim pastiche enough? Can we produce a local style? Now, space has a double nature. First, the physical spaces that surround us, and second, the inner metaphysical space inside us. The cosmos is in fact swallowed by the inner space, which is the vertical axis. This links the inner space and the cosmos, Upper Jerusalem and Jerusalem, Jacob's ladder. On this axis, God came down for his anthropological meetings with man. The second axis is born naturally in the desert, or at the edge of the desert. Our nomadic people go from oasis to oasis on the horizontal axis, or later, from ghetto to ghetto. The desert is the furnace where the Jewish and Arab people were born. The desert is a space to be crossed. The nomads are permanently moving around the desert, through the desert, outside and inside the desert. You spend time crossing the desert. If moving on the vertical axis is sudden, the movement on the horizontal axis is divided into days and nights, a day and then another day, and for 6 days we go on, and on the 7th day we rest. We are resting time. We are stopping the horizontal movement. We are changing the dimension. We are moving on the vertical axis, Shabbat. The Shabbat is the result of a gigantic effort, comparable with the effort needed to stop the rotation of Mother Earth. What enormous power does a nation that is able to stop time possess? By discovering time, we stop it. By stopping it, we cancel it. A people that are able to arrest time can survive it. The movement on the vertical axis cannot be stopped. Only death, the Holocaust, can destroy this link, this umbilical cord between the Jew and God, the Pharaoh, the Inquisition, Hitler, all tried and failed. The movement on the horizontal axis is of a different nature. It has a physical nature. Having a physical nature, it can be broken. For a while, for instance, a dam prevents the freedom of the river. With reawakened force or with lure, one nation can take another one hostage. When the barrage is opened or destroyed, the waters rush upon the old river bed or find new ways toward the seas. When Pharaoh opened the gates of Egypt, the Jewish river, into the desert towards hope and freedom. The joy of leaving Egypt, remembered every year on Passover, is the joy of getting back on the horizontal axis, one essential dimension of the Jewish space, the joy of getting back to childhood, to wandering, to the nomads. The Passover Haggadah says, in every generation, each person must regard himself as if he himself had come out of Egypt. Why is this so? I said that we cancel time, past and present, turning into the future. This kind of one-dimensional time is at the core of our optimism, with roots in the desert, and is the source of this people surviving in time, in history. Nation or people living in the past disappear. Nation or people stuck into the present panic and lose the instinct and wish for survival. But the healthy Jew has strong roots in the past. These roots are confirmed by the present and are in preparation for the future. But if we are to consider ourselves as being those who escaped from Egypt it is because in order to stay healthy, we have to keep an unobstructed horizontal axis. We, be it the tribe, the family, or the individual, have to be ready at any time, in any generation, to get up and move on. This is our way of railing the universe, as a basis the horizontal axis, and raising towards the sky the vertical axis from any spot we are at. Let us consider the last movement, which in my opinion completes and closes our space. The graphic form I propose. As an architect, I am the slave of graphic visual representation or symbolic construction or unconscious structural reproductions. It is a double direction spiral. From the point or place, makom, mahal, toward the infinite, and from the boundless toward the spot. This spiral is, by definition, undefined, because its origin and its conclusion is in permanent movement. Its ampleness is boundless towards the macrocosmos or the microcosmos. In my symbolic model, the Garden of Eden represents the perfect space. The inner space, or the affective space, and the outside space, or the affective space, are sitting there, one on the top of the other, and disappear or melt together, or merge with the spiral into the unique point. When Adam is expelled from the garden, the unique point disintegrates into affective and effective spaces, a nuclear explosion. The spiral is unfolding threateningly in circles, wider and wider. Here, the Exodus began. The Jewish people is forged in the heat of the explosion. Adam starts his journey on the horizontal axis, sliding simultaneously on the vertical axis, and is permanently troubled by the conscious or unconscious presence of the undefined spiral. The affective space is defined in my model by the vertical axis and by the spiral. I consider the points of meeting between the undefined spiral and the horizontal axis as signifying anthropological encounters between God and man. Let us see what happens when different dimensions of the Jewish space are changing. Let us consider the Jewish ghetto. The horizontal is compressed to a minimum, and the Jewish space is distorted along the vertical axis. This distortion corresponds to the alienation that enters his interior affective metaphysic space and loses almost every contact with the outside affective real space. The vertical axis represents the spiritual dimensions of the Jewish space. The Jews never built rich synagogues, they built bridges between the heart and God, said Heschel. The movement of the Jews on the horizontal axis is stopped at one point, and from here the movement is only vertical. According to our model, the ideal space is the point of coincidence of the vertical and horizontal axis and the undefined spiral. The compression of the horizontal axis, which distorts the Jewish space on the vertical direction, detaches the Jew from the immediate reality and destroys his instinct of physical survival. The cosmos has both a material and abstract nature. Its abstract valence lets the affective space penetrate it and melt in it. The cosmos, because it becomes one with the affective space, becomes a space of second importance. The effective space belonging to the cosmos meets the affective space only at the cosmic level. The cosmic, affective, metaphysical space, therefore, is primordial. Due to the fact that the affective space is melted into the cosmos, the Jew in fact swallows the cosmos, a burning fire. For a while, this inner fire delivers maybe heat and light outside, like the temple which illuminates around and the sun itself. Some looked at the Jews and saw the Spirit of God itself, but the swallowed Spirit of God burns and destroys. The formation of the Jewish space along the vertical direction contains the germ of the physical destruction of the Jewish people. The cancellation of the horizontal dimension and of the effective balance of the Jewish space infects our nation with death. The healthy and balanced Jewish space is round, vertical and horizontal of equal size, completed with the spiral almost round. It is not the Shekhinah, the Spirit of God, that burns inside the Jew, but the Jew flourishes in the Spirit of God. Not the Jew which swallows the cosmos, but the Jew living in the cosmos. We shall try to understand the significance of Israel, of its physical and spiritual space today. As a compulsory condition for the nation's health, I consider the existence of a marked horizontal axis, the axis of movement. The common subconscious of our people was forged in history through the dialogue with the desert. When the Jews knocked at the Canaan doors, they were a foreign nation. I consider today's Jews as being very much like those Jews as they came out of the desert. The certain and fruitful trauma that Israel's tribes went through in those 40 years of the Exodus is the last and most important historical event with implications on the nature of formation of our nation's consciousness, based on our common subconscious then forged. Apparently the condition is born between a nomadic people, the Jews then and today, and a limited territory, a precise geography. Is Canaan just a station or the horizontal axis, or the last station, the conclusion, the destination? For nomad, the oasis is the destination, a temporary destination by definition. The temporality of the oasis stop is not always evident or declared. A traveler who is fed up with the road does not think of the road after. And the oasis seems to him then as a final destination. God promised Canaan to us in our long and difficult journey through the desert, apparently the final station. Canaan, Israel, is a bright beacon in the Exodus night, the promise of the ideal land and the nostalgia of the Garden of Eden. The nomadic genes then and today are stronger than the conscious nostalgia for an ideal place may be, but fixed in space. Jerusalem is always in front of us, next year, and not yesterday or today. It is a symbol, an illusion, a fata morgana. It is a moral comfort. It is the evidence of place. It is the basis and not just an oasis. The basis of a nomadic existence is the oasis. There the nomad rests, feeds himself, and looks up and enjoys the blue sky. Without the oasis, the nomad's existence is impossible. Once refreshed with plenty of food and water for the camels as well, the nomad rises up, listens to the ancestral call, and he's again on the road. Back there remain the basis, the oasis, the warrant of survival. Build Jerusalem is a guarantee that next year we will return there, in our oasis. We will take to fill, to start again, and then a few years later we'll be back, and so on, regardless of passing time and generations. Apparently, the end of the Exodus is the conquest of Canaan. Only few places in the world have the sweetness of Canaan, the ultimate oasis. There, not only nature flourishes, but passion, intelligence, and spirit as well. I walk in my garden, a corner of paradise. In front, across the valley, I see an Arab village. How sweet is the land of Canaan. In this sunny place with high skies, tribes come, appear and disappear, one after another, then and now. Their desire is to own a piece of paradise. Can our nomadic people find a place and stay there for good? Assuming that history can bring us to the gates of Canaan, in King Solomon's realm, or in Spain, or in some other place, The nomadic genes are at work, accumulating nomadic tension or nomadic energy. This energy finally blows up and throws us back on the horizontal axis, our permanent journey. I consider the Israeli space an improvement of the oasis notion, a kind of sanatorium space in which the Jew, tied by the road, finds his shelter, enjoys the sun and shade, and drinks fresh water which seems delicious in the vicinity of the primordial desert. I consider this as a sanatorium space in which, for an instant, the condition of coincidence of the affective and effective space are recreated. This is a space in which the Jew, out of the ghetto, sees and smells the flowers and not only reads about them. The Jew is rebuilding his muscles, even sometimes at the expense of his brains. A mother space, close to the ideal space, the paradise, because the closest place to Upper Jerusalem is Jerusalem. Archimedes said, "Give me a place to stand, and I'll move the earth." Jerusalem is a place to stand of the Jewish people. By 1986, my ideas on the spatial nature, meaning and relation to space here in Jerusalem and Israel were already defined. I was involved in some unsuccessful attempts to win the competitions for the High Court of Justice, the water park in Jerusalem, and the Emek Ayalot Yudvata Cultural Center in the Negev Desert. Far from being desperate, the office was active with the regular jobs. I was sure that sooner or later I would get the proper commission where I would have the scope to express my approach to the local space. Then too, like today, I refused to accept the notion of an international architecture. I felt that our message should be different if we genuinely wish to deliver a real culture message to the world. And more important, if we want to create an architecture which fits these people, a basic and healthy approach to environment. In 1988, I was invited by the Jewish Agency to participate in another competition for the design of the Hartman Institute campus in Jerusalem. This institute is dedicated to the study of Judaism in an open, progressive way. Some of the best scholars from Israel and from the diaspora meet here to share their learning. The Institute also opens its gates to learned scholars from the Christian and Islamic world. Secular Jews, both educators and students, come here to study the Bible and the Jewish tradition. The Institute facilitates ecumenical interfaith meetings. I won the competition. The building of the campus started in the end of '93. The first stage was completed in '96, and the second stage a couple of months ago. The Hartman Institute houses two research buildings, a central study building or Bet Midrash, and a high school. I applied in my design everything I learned through the years about building in Jerusalem. The elements of what I defined as Israeli or Jewish space are to be found here. This project is therefore a conclusion of my architectural work up to now in Jerusalem, and I want to share some with you here. The nostalgia for the lost Garden of Eden, the ideal space where both affective and effective spaces coincide. the unobstructed walks and views on the horizontal axis. The vertical axis emphasized by those private pieces of sky which characterize every inner court of the buildings and in between the different buildings of the campus. Fresh water and shade, basic elements of the oasis, facilitates the visitor's walk through the campus. The contrast and dialogue between transparency and stone, secure shelter and the option kept open of departure, dialogue between the open and the closed, between the outside and the inside. A Jerusalem campus, modest and secret from outside, yet majestic inside. Arabs and Jews have a common ancestry. In our history, we developed a deeply similar relationship to space and environment. In my attempt to define the dimension of the Jewish or Israeli space, I discovered all of a sudden that our, Israelis and Palestinians, main meeting point is our common relationship to space. Jerusalem is not a united city. It never was and may never be. Not because of national divisions. Any city is by definition divided between the rich and the poor, between the old and the young, between the sick and the healthy. And then we planners created some more divisions. We invented zoning. Jerusalem is blessed with some extras. Divisions between Arabs and Jews, and then between Muslims, Christians, Armenians and Copts, and then between secular Jews, religious Jews, ultra-Orthodox Jews, Moroccan Jews, Russian Jews. So Jerusalem is and will remain a profoundly divided city. This does not necessarily pose a problem, but it poses challenges. Our challenge is not to fight this division. Our challenge is how to build Jerusalem as a place to be shared and enjoyed by all. Our challenge is how to educate the young, not just to live together, but to share Jerusalem in peace and mutual respect and understanding. How the different communities of Jerusalem can exist and coexist, one next to the other. You saw those images of very young kids in Mea Shearim running away from my camera. I would say that they are already lost for our purpose. Indoctrination in hate starts very early in someone's life. We Jews and Arabs, Israeli and Palestinians, will share this land and city for generations to come. We can draw borders on the map, but the environment does not recognize borders. There is one land, there is one city. So physical, material division is impossible. The worlds that do exist are in our soul, though there is an urgent need for a fundamental transformation in our consciousness. Thanks to my Indian friend and collaborator, Venkateshwar Ramaswamy from Calcutta, I was introduced to this teaching of Swami Vivekananda, the Indian religious preacher. The little fish wants to fly from its enemies in the water. How does it so? By evolving wings and becoming a bird. The fish did not change the water or the air, the change was in itself. All through evolution you find that the conquest of nature comes by change in the subject. And the famous Jew, Jesus Christ of our land, explained this as, except ye be converted and become as little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Remember those images from Mea Shearim. And now here in Hadassah Har HaTzofim on Mount Scopus Hospital, Jews and Arabs are born in the same room, in the same building, every day. A first meeting point. We should keep and groom it. If we try, Arab and Jew together, to go back to our roots, we'll go back to our nation's childhood. And then, as the Indian mystic Sri Ramakrishna says, to the child, everyone is equal. He has no discrimination of high and low, and consequently, no distinction of caste. Nor has he any hatred or any idea of cleanliness and pollution.